He invited me to that gala so the whole city could watch me break. 10 minutes later, Africa's most untouchable billionaire was holding out his hand and asking me to stand beside him. Amara Okafor did not cry when the invitation arrived. She read it once in the narrow back room of her studio in Surulere, then folded it with slow, careful fingers and placed it beside a box of unpaid invoices. The card was thick, cream-colored, edged in gold, and expensive in the particular way rich people like to announce without words. It invited her to the Bamidele Foundation Royal Gala, the most photographed charity event in Lagos that year. At the bottom, in neat black print, was one line that made her chest go still. Special guest of Mr. Tunde Balogun, her ex-fiancé, her former business partner, the man who had left her 6 weeks earlier after telling her that love was beautiful, but poverty was exhausting. Amara did not cry because she had already cried the week he left. She had cried when he emptied their shared office account. She had cried when she discovered he had pitched her original bridal collection to investors as his own expansion concept. She had cried when suppliers started calling her, politely asking when their money would arrive. She had cried until something harder settled inside her. By the time the invitation came, the tears were gone. Only clarity remained. In the workroom outside, 3 women waited for her decision. Amina was at the cutting table. Sade was threading pearls into lace sleeves. Old Mama Ife, whose hands had woven aso-oke for 40 years, sat near the fan with a measuring tape around her neck and quiet worry in her eyes. "You won't go," Sade said the moment Amara stepped out. Amara placed the invitation on the table. Amina read it first and scoffed. "He wants a show." "He wants witnesses," Mama Ife corrected gently. "Men like that do not just hurt a woman. They prefer an audience." Amara looked around the studio, at the cracked walls, at the dresses hanging unfinished because clients had delayed payment, at the shelves holding indigo dye, imported thread, and hope she could no longer afford to waste. "My rent is due in 9 days," she said. "Our fabric vendor wants half up front. The cooperative in Abeokuta needs money for new looms. If Tunde wants an audience, let him have one." Sade frowned. "For what?" Amara lifted her chin. "So they can see I survived him." That afternoon, she opened the cedar chest her mother had left her and drew out a folded wrapper of hand-woven deep blue aso-oke streaked with silver thread. Her mother had called it storm cloth because it looked dark until light hit it. Then it flashed. Amara spent the next 6 hours turning it into a gown with a structured waist, clean shoulders, and a train lined in bronze silk. No imported crystals, no European label, no borrowed luxury, just African craftsmanship, sharp enough to stand in any room. If she was going to walk into a trap, she would do it dressed like an answer. By 7:30, Lagos was glowing. The roads near Victoria Island were choked with polished black cars and camera crews. Security lights swept across the front of the Royal Meridian Hall, where the city's richest names posed beneath gold banners and spoke loudly about philanthropy, while diamonds flashed under the chandeliers. Men who underpaid workers were donating to youth initiatives. Women who destroyed reputations over brunch were smiling for charity pages. It was that kind of night. Amara stepped out of a modest, hired car and felt the shift immediately. Heads turned. Not because they recognized her name. Her name still belonged mostly to workshops, brides, fashion assistants, and women who valued good tailoring over gossip. They looked because she arrived alone, because her dress was unforgettable, because confidence, when worn by a woman they expected to be broken, was more shocking than beauty. Inside, the ballroom glittered with old money and fresh cruelty. A quartet played near the mirrored staircase. Waiters moved like shadows with trays of champagne. Journalists circled the edges of the room, hunting scandal disguised as society coverage. And there, in the center of the main floor, surrounded by investors and camera flashes, stood Tunde Balogun. He looked exactly the way Betrayal always imagined itself would look. Perfect tuxedo, polished smile, expensive watch. One hand resting at the waist of the woman beside him. Her name was Zainab Danjuma, niece of import magnate Chief Felix Danjuma. Beautiful, poised, wealthy, and connected to the very investors Tunde used to say would one day take his vision global. She wore a champagne gown so covered in foreign beadwork it seemed less designed than purchased by force. Tunde saw Amara before she reached the second champagne tower. His smile changed. That was what hurt, not the sight of him, but the satisfaction that crossed his face. He had expected her to come. He had counted on it. He nudged Zainab, murmured something, and together they began walking toward her. People noticed instantly. Nothing travels faster in elite circles than the possibility of humiliation. "Amara," Tunde said warmly, as if they had ended on civilized terms. "You made it." She held her glass but did not drink. The invitation sounded difficult to refuse. Zainab's smile was polished and light. "We were worried you might take it badly." "Take what badly?" Amara asked. A few people nearby pretended not to listen. Tunde slipped one hand into his pocket. "Come on, let's not make this tense. We all want to move forward." Move forward. Men always loved those words when they were the only ones moving. Amara met his eyes. "Then say what you brought me here to hear." A tiny silence opened around them. Tunde's jaw tightened, only briefly. Then he gave a theatrical exhale, as if she were being difficult in public and he were determined to stay noble. "Fine," he said. "Zainab and I are engaged." A murmur moved through the circle. Zainab touched his arm, playing gentle. "Tunde." "No," he said, still looking at Amara. "She deserves honesty." Amara almost laughed. Honesty had not been his preferred language when he siphoned client deposits out of their business account. "And?" she asked. The word hit him harder than tears would have. "And," he repeated, "I wanted you to hear it here, properly, with respect." "With respect?" Her voice stayed calm. "Is that what this is?" Before he could answer, another voice entered, smooth and sharp. "My dear, don't be unfair," said Chief Mrs. Ronke Afolayan, a widow with too much wealth and too little mercy. "A man cannot be expected to tie himself to struggle forever." Several women laughed behind their glasses. Mrs. Afolayan stepped closer, examining Amara's gown with glittering eyes. "Though I must say, you've done wonderfully with limited resources." There it was, the knife wrapped in silk. Amara turned toward her fully. "Thank you," she said. "And you've done wonderfully with unlimited ones." The laughter stopped. Tunde's face hardened. Zainab looked away. Mrs. Afolayan smiled, but it was the smile of a woman filing away vengeance for later. "Sharp tongue. Still, what will you do now, dear?"
Talented girls usually need a strong man behind them eventually. Amara set down her untouched champagne. No, she said softly. Talented girls need capital, discipline, and time. Men are optional. This time the silence was larger. Somewhere to her left, someone inhaled too quickly. Tunde stepped closer, lowering his voice. You always did mistake pride for strength. Amara looked at him. Really looked at him.
At the polished arrogance, the rehearsed superiority, the desperate need to stand taller by making her smaller. And you, she said, always mistook access for achievement. He opened his mouth. The room changed before he could speak. It was strange how power announced itself. Not with music, not with noise, but with space. The energy near the entrance shifted, and conversations thinned as more people turned. Security straightened. Investors adjusted their faces. Even the photographers re-aimed with sudden urgency. Malik Adeyemi had arrived. Everybody in the room knew his name. Founder of Adeyemi Global Holdings, shipping, renewable energy, telecom infrastructure, real estate, and a new luxury heritage brand that had already disrupted 3 markets in 2 years. He was one of the wealthiest men on the continent, impossible to impress, almost never seen at social events he didn't fund personally, and notorious for leaving rooms the second he grew bored in them. Tonight he wore black. No embroidery, no show. A simple tuxedo, a silver cufflink, and the expression of a man who had no interest in pleasing anyone. Amara had never met him. She had seen him once on a business magazine cover, and once on a banner at a manufacturing summit she could not afford to attend. That was all. Men like Malik Adeyemi moved in worlds that passed above ordinary people, like aircraft over roofs. Yet as he entered the ballroom, greeted no one for longer than required, and scanned the room, his gaze stopped. On her. Not on Tunde, not on Zainab, not on the reporters or governors or investors. On Amara. She felt it like a hand at the base of her spine. The room felt it too. Malik crossed the ballroom without haste. People moved aside before he reached them. He walked through the circle gathering around Tunde's performance as if it were smoke. When he stopped in front of Amara, the silence was so complete that the clink of a distant glass sounded loud. Miss Okafor, he said. His voice was deep, measured, and certain. Amara blinked once. You know me? I know your work, he replied. Tunde tried to recover control. Mr. Adeyemi, good evening. We were just… I know, Malik said without turning. That single sentence wiped Tunde out of the moment. Malik looked at Amara again. Not at her mouth, not at her body, but at her face, as if he were reading something there. Then his gaze dropped briefly to the gown. You made this, he said. It was not a question. Yes. With your own textile source? Yes. And they invited you here to be insulted. The truth, stated plainly in public, embarrassed everyone except the woman who had lived it. Amara lifted one shoulder. That seems to be the evening's entertainment. A flicker passed through his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Then, in front of half the city's elite, Malik Adeyemi extended his hand. Come with me, he said. The room nearly stopped breathing. Tunde laughed once, too sharply. I'm sorry. Come with you where? Malik still did not look at him. To the stage. Amara stared at the offered hand. Why? Because, he said calmly, I am about to invest in the most underestimated woman in this room. And I prefer my announcements made properly. For the first time that night, surprise hit her hard enough to unbalance her. Around them, whispers exploded. Zainab looked horrified. Mrs. Afolayan looked furious. Tunde looked like a man watching a building collapse and realizing too late he is inside it. Amara placed her hand in Malik's. His grip was warm and steady. Together they crossed the ballroom while cameras pivoted and voices swelled behind them. The foundation chairman, startled but too wealthy to show it, stepped away from the microphone as Malik mounted the stage. He did not release her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Malik said, taking the microphone with the kind of ease only real authority possessed. I had intended to speak tonight about cultural preservation, local industry, and the future of African luxury. He paused. But I have just been given a better example. Every lens in the room found Amara. Malik turned slightly toward her. This gown was designed and made by Amara Okafor, founder of House of Nia, using hand-woven textile from local women whose craft deserves global recognition. Starting next month, Adeyemi Heritage will enter an exclusive development partnership with House of Nia. The hall erupted. Journalists rushed forward. Investors started calculating. Socialites started rewriting their expressions. Tunde looked physically ill. Malik continued. And for those who still believe value must arrive with foreign approval before they can recognize it, I suggest tonight has already taught you something expensive. That line would be quoted in magazines for weeks. When he handed the microphone back, the applause came in waves. Some clapped because they meant it. Others clapped because power had already chosen a side. Off stage, Amara turned to him in disbelief. You didn't ask me. No, he said. I observed you. That is not the same thing. No, he agreed. It isn't. Which is why I'd like to speak with you tomorrow, privately, before you decide whether to reject me. She almost smiled. Decide? One should always let brilliant women keep the pleasure of choosing. He said it so plainly that she did not know what to do with it. The next day, Malik arrived at her studio at exactly 10 in the morning. No entourage, no press, no drama. He stepped through the narrow doorway and took in everything at once. The industrial irons, the hand sketches pinned to corkboard, the half-finished bridal gowns, the women pretending not to stare at him. Unlike most powerful men, he did not look around with condescension. He looked like a man measuring potential. Amara led him into her office, which was really a partitioned corner with 2 chairs, a desk, and ledgers she had been avoiding. I assume you don't usually announce business partnerships without permission, she said. I don't usually see work like yours being publicly mocked, he replied. He placed a slim folder on her desk. Inside were documents, real ones, not vague promises, not flirting disguised as opportunity. The top page contained numbers so large they made her pulse jump. What is this? An offer, Malik said, but not the one the papers will guess. He sat opposite her, calm, controlled, direct. I'm launching a heritage luxury division, he said. Not costume, not export cliches packaged for foreign applause. I want African textiles, craftsmanship, and design treated as high-value intellectual property. Your work is exactly what that division needs. Amara kept reading. Funding for House of Nia, debt clearance, equipment investment, profit protection clauses, majority creative control retained by her, employment guarantees for the Abeokuta Weaving Cooperative. legal support for pattern copyright, international expansion potential. It was more than rescue. It was architecture. She looked up slowly. Why me? Because you design like memory matters, he said. And because last night, while men with inherited confidence tried to reduce you, you stood like someone who already knew your worth. For one strange second, Amara forgot to breathe. Then he said the second thing. There is also a personal condition. Of course there was. She leaned back. Now we arrive. A shadow of amusement touched his face. My grandfather left controlling interest in our Kaduna textile mills to a married heir who could prove commitment to preserving African craft communities. It was his way of forcing sentiment into business. The board has given me 60 days to satisfy the clause before rival directors move to sell the mills to importers. Amara stared at him. And your solution, she said carefully, is marriage. A strategic one, he answered. 18 months, private terms, public dignity, full independence. At the end, if we both wish, we part without scandal. She laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was too absurd not to make sound. You are asking me to marry you so you can save your mills, and in return, you will save my house. I am asking you to build something with me, he corrected. Marriage is the legal frame. The work is the real reason. That answer unsettled her more than romance would have. Romance was easy to mistrust. Respect was not. For 3 days, Amara reviewed the contract. For 3 nights, she barely slept. She visited the cooperative in Abeokuta and watched women weaving under a tin roof that leaked in 2 places. She looked at her late mother's old books and the unpaid tax letters piling in her studio. She called a lawyer she could barely afford and made him read every line twice. She asked questions. She changed clauses. She removed anything that smelled like ownership of her identity. When Malik returned, she had the contract on her desk and a pen in her hand. If I do this, she said, my name does not disappear inside yours. It will not. My business remains mine. Yes. My people are protected first, not last. They are. And if you ever speak to me the way small men speak to women they think they rescued, I will end this marriage in public and humiliate you with grammar before the cameras arrive. For the first time, Malik laughed openly. The sound transformed his whole face. I would deserve it, he said. Amara signed. The civil wedding happened 11 days later in a quiet registry, witnessed by her aunt, his older sister, 2 lawyers, and 1 judge who tried very hard not to look curious. No orchestra, no cathedral, no fake romance, no performance. Just signatures, vows spoken without trembling, and the strange silence that follows life-changing direction without warning. By sunset, Lagos had turned it into legend. The poor designer who became Mrs. Malik Adeyemi. The humiliated ex-fiancé who married a billionaire in less than 2 weeks. The unknown seamstress who outplayed society. Most of it was nonsense. The truth was less glamorous and more dangerous. Amara moved into Malik's home on the mainland side of the lagoon, a glass and stone estate designed like a modern fortress with art on every wall and discipline in every corridor. Staff greeted her respectfully. His sister, Nyla, watched her with open curiosity. Malik showed her the private wing assigned to her, the design lab floor he had cleared for House of Nia, and the secured archives for the textile division. Then he did something she did not expect. He handed her operational access, not decorative authority, not ceremonial meetings, real authority. Budget approvals, vendor reviews, factory reports, cooperative transfer schedules, branding strategy documents, trademark filings. Use what you need, he said. You trust me that quickly? No, he said. I verified you that quickly. Again, she almost smiled. The Kaduna mills were worse than the reports suggested. On paper, they were functioning. In reality, they were bleeding. Cheap imported copies had undercut local production. Middle managers skimmed supply budgets. A design consultant from London had proposed modernizing the brand by stripping out almost everything African and replacing it with beige minimalism for global appeal. Amara rejected that presentation in under 6 minutes. If we erase the soul of the cloth, she told the board, all we're left with is fabric and ego. Some men resented her instantly. Others pretended to. Malik said almost nothing during that meeting, but when the chairman questioned whether emotion belonged in manufacturing, Malik leaned back and replied, House of Nia increased online demand by 31% in 6 days, and Mrs. Adeyemi did that before lunch. If you would like to continue underestimating her, please do it at your own expense, not mine. That shut the room down. Weeks turned into months, and under Amara's direction, things began to change. The weaving cooperative received new looms, fair contracts, health coverage, and direct royalty terms on pattern usage. Young designers were brought in from Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, and Kigali. Archival motifs were digitized but not diluted. A capsule collection called Daughters of the Dust sold out online in 30 hours. International buyers began calling. A Paris showroom requested samples, then a Johannesburg retailer, then Dubai. Where Tunde had always talked about vision, Amara built one. And because the world is consistent in its cruelty, success attracted enemies faster than failure ever had. The first article appeared on a Monday, then another by Wednesday. By the weekend, business blogs were whispering that House of Nia's indigenous originality was manufactured. Anonymous sources claimed Amara's patterns were stolen. One columnist implied Malik had plucked a struggling designer from obscurity purely for optics. Another suggested the marriage itself was a branding trick built to manipulate public sentiment. None of it was completely accidental. Amara discovered the shape of the attack at a trade lunch when an old supplier refused to meet her eyes. Later that night, one of Nyla's assistants quietly forwarded a leaked pitch deck circulating among investors. At the bottom of it was a name: Balogun Creative Imports. Tunde. But he wasn't acting alone. The money behind the smear campaign came through shell companies tied to Chief Felix Danjuma, Zainab's uncle, whose import empire stood to lose millions if local textile manufacturing gained real prestige. If Malik's mills survived and House of Nia expanded, counterfeit imports disguised as African-inspired luxury would become harder to sell at inflated margins. It was not just revenge. It was economics. When Amara brought the evidence to Malik's office, he listened without interrupting. Rain tapped against the windows. His desk lamp cast gold over ledgers and legal drafts. Tunde is helping them, she said quietly. I assumed he would, Malik replied. She stared at him. You knew? I knew small men rarely waste humiliation. They convert it into sabotage. Amara crossed her arms. And you did not think to tell me? He looked up then, expression steady. I thought you preferred the truth when it came with proof. The answer irritated her because it was not entirely wrong. So she found proof. For 9 nights, Amara worked through vendor logs, dye batch codes, customs declarations, and internal pattern archives. She compared stitch maps from House of Nia originals against counterfeit versions found in upscale boutiques. She traced one repeating motif, a river spiral her mother had created 20 years earlier, to a production order shipped through a warehouse linked to Danjuma imports. Someone inside the Kaduna mills was leaking files. The revelation cracked something open. An internal audit followed, then another. Finally, buried inside procurement records, Amara found it. Unauthorized scans of archival designs transferred through a consultant account to an outside server. The consultant had already fled. But the transfers led to one warehouse by a Papa port. Malik assembled legal teams. Amara wanted to go with them. No, he said. Yes, she replied. It could turn ugly. It has already turned ugly. You just prefer ugly in boardrooms. He held her gaze for a long second, then nodded once. Stay beside me. The warehouse raid happened at dawn. What they found inside was enough to shake markets. Rolls of counterfeit cloth, stolen digital pattern libraries, forged certificates of origin, quiet agreements showing several retailers knowingly marketed copied local designs as premium imports. And there, pale and sweating beneath fluorescent lights, was Tunde. He did not look triumphant anymore. He looked tired. Cheap greed ages badly. When security escorted everyone into the open, Tunde asked to speak to Amara alone. Malik did not like it. Amara could see that from the cold set of his mouth. But she also knew unfinished things had a way of remaining loud inside the heart. So she stepped aside. Tunde rubbed his wrists where the guards had held him. You think you won. Amara almost smiled. She had heard enough broken men say those words to recognize them as the final shelter of people who had run out of facts. This was never a game to me, she said. He looked around the yard, at the seized goods, at the officers, at Malik standing 20 feet away like judgment in human form. You were never supposed to become this. This what? Untouchable. The honesty in that one word was uglier than every lie before it. Amara stepped closer. No, Tunde. That was your mistake. You thought my value depended on whether you could see it. His eyes hardened. Felix will not go down alone. That sentence mattered. Within 48 hours, Malik's investigators uncovered a second plan. When the counterfeit network collapsed, Danjuma's people intended to destroy the old archival building beside the Kaduna mills. The one holding original weave ledgers, royalty agreements, artisan signatures, and the documents proving ownership of cultural designs. Without that archive, prosecutions would weaken, claims would blur, theft would become harder to pin down. The attack came 2 nights later. The sky over Kaduna was black with storm clouds. Wind hammered the mill windows. Most workers had gone home. Only security, machine staff, and the night inventory team remained. Amara was in the archive annex with Mama Ife, reviewing old pattern books for the next collection launch, when the power cut. The backup lights flickered red. Then came the first shout. Not from inside the archive, from the dye house. Fire. By the time Amara reached the main corridor, security was already running toward the eastern wing where flames licked up stacked cartons. Alarms screamed. Workers shouted names. Rain began hitting the roof in violent sheets. Malik arrived seconds later, issuing orders with terrifying calm. Evacuate the lower floor. Seal the generator room. Call the state unit. Move everyone west. Smoke pushed through the halls. Amara looked toward the burning wing, then toward the security map mounted near the office door. Something about the pattern struck her instantly. The fire points were too scattered, too strategic, not meant to destroy the whole mill, meant to pull people away. Her eyes widened. "The archive," she said. Malik turned. "What?" "They don't want the machinery. They want the records." Even as she spoke, a crash sounded from outside the annex. Malik's face changed. He grabbed a radio. "All units to Archive Block C, now!" They ran through the rain. 3 men had already forced the side door. One was dragging fuel cans. Another was yanking document boxes toward a broken window. The third raised something metallic when he saw security approaching. The next moments fractured into speed and noise. A warning shout. A body hitting the floor. Rain spraying through shattered glass. Malik moving forward with the impossible focus of someone who had spent his whole life protecting things too valuable to leave unattended. Amara saw a torch tossed toward the paper stacks. She moved before thought arrived. Crossing the slick floor, she snatched a wool preservation cloth off a shelf and threw it over the flame, just as it kissed the corner of a ledger crate. A guard tackled one intruder. Another slipped and smashed into a table. The third tried to flee through the loading door but ran into 2 workers coming from the west corridor with extinguishers and raw anger. Within minutes, it was over. Police lights bathed the yard blue. Fuel cans lay scattered in the mud. The archive, though shaken, still stood. And inside those shelves were names, patterns, signatures, histories. Proof that women whose grandmothers had woven by lantern light owned more than memory. They owned authorship. They owned value. They owned their work. As officers led the last intruder away, Chief Felix Danjuma's operations chief was identified among the arrested. By morning, warrants had widened. Accounts froze. Partners fled. Journalists who once carried rumor now carried scandal. Zainab quietly disappeared from the public scene. Tunde, facing charges, tried negotiating himself into relevance and failed. The empire of imitation began to collapse. Peace did not return immediately. Real peace never does. First came inquiries, testimonies, legal filings, televised commentary, emergency board meetings, and market shock. Then came the public apology cycle, that awkward season when people who mocked you decide they had merely misunderstood your trajectory. Mrs. Afolayan sent flowers. Amara sent them to a hospital. But in the quiet spaces between crisis and recovery, something else changed. The contract that had brought her into Malik's house had long since stopped describing what existed between them. It was there in the late-night tea left outside her design room when he knew she was overworking. It was there in the way he listened when she spoke about cloth like ancestry. It was there in the way she no longer measured silence between them as distance. It had become rest. One evening, months after the warehouse arrests and weeks after the mill attack, Amara found Malik alone on the terrace overlooking the water. Lagos shimmered beyond the dark, all lights and motion and restless ambition. He did not turn when she approached. "The board approved the full artisan equity model," he said. She smiled. "I know. Nyla called me before the email reached your office." "That sounds like sabotage." "That sounds like having people who love me." At that, he finally looked at her. The wind moved softly between them. "I should have said this earlier," he said. "Long before the gala. Long before the contract." Amara's heart began to beat too carefully. "What?" "When I first saw your work," Malik said, "I thought it was the most intelligent fashion language I had seen from this market in years. When I saw how you carried yourself that night, I understood the work was only the surface. You were the rare thing beneath it." She could not speak, so he kept going. "I told myself respect was enough. Partnership was enough. Strategy was enough. Then the days became months, and I found myself looking for your voice in rooms before I entered them." He exhaled once. "That has never happened to me before." Amara stepped closer. "Malik." He shook his head slightly, as if words had become unfamiliar. "I don't want 18 months. I don't want a clean exit clause. I don't want the possibility of losing you explained to me by lawyers." The city noise seemed to fall away. He reached into his jacket. For one absurd second, Amara thought of contracts again. Instead, he drew out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring of gold and deep blue sapphire, wrapped on either side with tiny silver patterns modeled after the storm cloth her mother had woven years ago. Amara's vision blurred. "You noticed," she whispered. "I notice everything about you," he said. "That is the problem." A laugh escaped her through the tears. Then he did something the most feared billionaire in 3 industries probably never did for anyone. He looked nervous. "Amara Okafor," he said, voice lower now, stripped of boardroom certainty. "I married you for strategy. I stayed because every important room became brighter when you entered it. I fought beside you because I admired you. I learned you because I respected you. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I fell in love with you so completely that even my silence began speaking your name. So this time, I am not asking for partnership, protection, or timing." He opened the box fully. "I am asking for you." Amara covered her mouth with one hand. The sea breeze moved around them. In the distance, a boat horn sounded across the water. Somewhere inside the house, Nyla was probably eavesdropping with criminal dedication. Amara looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the strange road that had brought her from insult to empire, from survival to softness. Then she smiled the kind of smile that comes only when a woman has stopped apologizing for her own becoming. "Yes," she said. Malik's shoulders lowered, just slightly, as though a weight even he had not named finally left him. "Yes," she repeated. "But this time, no clauses." A rare, full smile broke across his face. "Agreed. And no pretending you rescued me. I wouldn't dare." "You invested early," she corrected. "That is different." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like memory. Then he pulled her into him, and when he kissed her, it felt less like a dramatic beginning than a truth finally allowed to stand in the light. A year later, the first House of Nia Heritage flagship opened, with the cooperative women standing in the front row, not hidden in back rooms where history liked to place them. Their names were on the walls beside the patterns they helped preserve. Royalties flowed monthly. Young girls came through the doors and saw African luxury presented not as borrowed aspiration, but as origin, authority, and future. Journalists called Amara a symbol. Investors called her formidable. Women in the markets called her correct. But when she was asked, in one now famous interview, what she thought the real turning point had been, Amara simply smiled and answered, "The night they tried to embarrass me, they made a mistake. They thought they were bringing me into a room to be judged. They did not realize I was entering it to be revealed." And somewhere across the city, men like Tunde Balogun finally understood the lesson too late. A woman does not become powerful because a rich man chooses her. She becomes unforgettable when the world witnesses what she was already building before anyone thought to clap.